Hello, my name is Rebecca Hayes, and at 38 years old, I never thought I'd be facing my own father across a courtroom, listening as he systematically tried to dismantle my life. For years, I had chased his approval, a phantom that always remained just out of reach. Now, here he was, on the witness stand, testifying with cold conviction that I was an unstable, unreliable failure who couldn't provide a proper home for my own niece and nephew. He painted me as a man who drifted from job to job, a complete letdown. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have imagined, was that for the last 7 years, I had been a family court judge in this very city. And the man presiding over this case, the Chief Justice, wasn't just my superior, he was my mentor. What happened next brought a silence so profound to the courtroom that you could hear a pin drop. It was the moment my father's carefully constructed world came crashing down around him. Before we embark on this incredible journey together, I have a small, heartfelt favor to ask. Please subscribe to my channel, give this video a thumbs up. It costs you nothing but means the world to me. And let me know in the comments which beautiful corner of the world you're watching from. Your support truly makes all the difference. Growing up in Evanston, a historic suburb just north of Chicago, our house was a monument to my father's success. Arthur Hayes was a self-made man in commercial real estate, a titan who believed life was a battlefield where only the strong survived. Our sprawling brick home was his fortress, and inside, his word was law. He saw the world in black and white, success and failure, strength and weakness. From a young age, it was clear which category he expected me and my younger brother Ryan to fall into. My father's brand of love was conditional, measured in achievements and financial potential. An A on a report card was met with a curt nod and the question, "What's your plan for the extra credit?" Winning a spot on the varsity soccer team was good, but he wanted to know why I wasn't the captain. His expectations were a suffocating blanket, and I spent my childhood gasping for air. Stand up straight, Rebecca. A weak posture signals a weak mind. Don't waste time on art. It's for people who can't handle the real world. His voice became the soundtrack to my youth, a constant reminder of my perceived shortcomings. The buffer, the soft place in our rigid world, was my mother, Eleanor. She was a librarian with a love for stories and a gentle soul that contrasted sharply with my father's steel. She would find me in my room after one of my father's lectures and wrap me in a hug that smelled of old books and chamomile tea. "Your father just wants you to be strong, honey," she'd whisper, but her eyes told a different story. They held an apology for the harshness, a silent acknowledgement that his methods were wounding. She was the one who encouraged my love of reading, who saw my passion for debate not as a frivolous hobby, but as the sharpening of a keen mind. She made me feel seen. When I was 16, she was diagnosed with an aggressive form of ovarian cancer. For 18 months, our lives revolved around hospital visits and hushed conversations. My father approached her illness like a hostile takeover, determined to conquer it with the best doctors and the most expensive treatments. But cancer doesn't negotiate. When she passed away, the light in our house went out. I didn't just lose my mother. I lost my defender, the only person who believed I was enough, just as I was. After her death, my father's demeanor hardened even further. His grief manifested as an intensified drive for control and a near-total intolerance for any perceived weakness, especially from his sons. Ryan, 2 years my junior, had always been more eager to please, more willing to mold himself into our father's image. He enrolled in business school, joined our father's firm right after graduation, and tried to become the successor Arthur Hayes demanded. But the pressure was too much. The constant criticism, the impossible standards, they chipped away at him until there was nothing left. He started drinking to cope, a secret at first, then a problem, and finally, a full-blown addiction that would derail his life. I, on the other hand, chose a different path: rebellion. It wasn't loud or confrontational. It was quiet and academic. School became my sanctuary. I poured myself into my studies, finding solace in the clear logic of law and ethics. It was in the high school mock trial club that I first felt a sense of purpose, a feeling of rightness that had been absent in every other part of my life. When I told my father I wanted to apply to law school, he scoffed. We were in his mahogany-paneled study, the air thick with the scent of leather and his disapproval. "A lawyer? Rebecca, the real power is in building things, in assets, not in arguing over scraps. It's a service job. Focus on business. Don't be a failure." That word, failure, was his ultimate weapon. But for the first time, it didn't crush me. Standing there, surrounded by the trappings of his success, a cold, hard resolve formed in my chest. I wouldn't just become a lawyer, I would become a judge. Not to earn his approval, which I now knew was impossible, but to prove to myself that his definition of success wasn't the only one that mattered. My college years at Northwestern University were an exercise in quiet defiance. I majored in political science and economics, a pragmatic choice that my father grudgingly accepted, but my real passion was in the pre-law society and the volunteer work I did with a legal aid clinic in Chicago. I saw firsthand how the law could be a shield for the vulnerable, a tool to balance the scales. It was a world away from my father's cutthroat real estate deals, and I loved it. I paid for my own tuition with a combination of scholarships and part-time jobs, refusing to be financially tethered to him and his expectations. I worked as a barista at dawn, a library clerk in the evenings, and a research assistant on weekends. He called it unnecessary struggling. I called it freedom. It was during a grueling late-night study session in the university library that I met Sarah. She was brilliant, driven, and had a laugh that could cut through the thickest silence. She was in the business school, ironically, but she had none of my father's cold pragmatism. She was ambitious, but compassionate, and she saw something in me that I was only just beginning to see in myself. "You talk about justice like it's a living thing," she observed one night over coffee. "It's not just a career for you, is it?" She was the first person since my mother to truly listen. When I told her about my father, about the constant pressure and the feeling of never measuring up, she didn't offer pity. She offered perspective. "He's wrong, Rebecca," she said, her gaze steady. "His version of success is just one version. It doesn't have to be yours." With her support, my resolve to pursue law hardened from a goal into an inevitability. I studied for the LSATs in secret, hiding the prep books under my bed like contraband. I scored in the 99th percentile and earned a place at the University of Chicago Law School, one of the best in the country. When I called to tell my father, his reaction was exactly what I'd expected. "Chicago Law? How are you planning to pay for that? You're always reaching for things you can't afford, Rebecca. It's a pattern of poor financial judgment." I didn't tell him about the significant scholarship I'd been awarded. I didn't tell him about the student loans I was prepared to take on. I simply said, "I'll manage," and let him believe what he wanted. His disapproval was a constant, like background noise. I was learning to tune it out. Sarah and I got married in a simple ceremony at the courthouse during our final year of school. My father attended, his presence a heavy cloud in the small, joyful room. He cornered me before the ceremony began. "Are you sure about this, son? A career like yours, it doesn't leave much room for a family. You'll have to choose. Don't expect to succeed at both." It was another test, another attempt to sow doubt. I just looked at him and said, "I'm not you, Dad." After graduation, Sarah's finance career took off. She accepted a high-powered job at an investment firm downtown, quickly distinguishing herself. I, meanwhile, took a different route. I turned down lucrative offers from corporate firms and accepted a clerkship with a federal judge, Marcus Thorne. The pay was a fraction of what I could have been making, a fact my father never failed to mention. A glorified intern, he called me, still chasing prestige instead of building wealth. But that clerkship was the most formative experience of my career. Judge Thorne became my mentor. He was a brilliant legal mind with a profound sense of fairness. He saw my passion and nurtured it, teaching me not just the letter of the law, but its spirit. The clerkship with Judge Thorne solidified my path. It led to a position as an assistant state's attorney for Cook County, where I found my calling in the Juvenile Justice Division. I prosecuted cases of child abuse and neglect, fighting for kids who had no one else in their corner. The work was emotionally taxing, but deeply rewarding. It was meaningful in a way my father's world of spreadsheets and property values could never be. Of course, he saw it differently. "Working for the government," he'd say with disdain during our rare family dinners. "Another dead-end job with no upward mobility. When are you going to get serious about your career, Rebecca?" Each career move I made, he framed as another failure, another sign of my instability. To him, my path wasn't a ladder I was climbing. It was a random walk in the professional wilderness. The truth was, every step was deliberate, building on the last, moving me closer to my ultimate goal. I was gaining experience, building a reputation, and learning the intricacies of the very system I hoped to one day lead from the bench. 2 years into my job as an ASA, Sarah and I welcomed our daughter Chloe. Holding her for the first time, this perfect, tiny person, I felt a love so fierce and unconditional it rearranged my entire world. I looked into her eyes and made a silent promise. She would never have to earn my love. She would never doubt her worth. She would always know she was enough, exactly as she was. Balancing fatherhood with my demanding job was the greatest challenge of my life. There were nights I'd come home from a gut-wrenching trial and just hold Chloe, her warmth a balm on my frayed nerves. There were mornings I'd show up to court on 3 hours of sleep, a spit-up stain hidden under the lapel of my suit jacket. But Sarah and I were a team. We navigated the chaos together, trading off sleepless nights and daycare pickups, supporting each other's ambitions without reservation. My father, of course, saw it as further proof of my lack of focus. "You work too much," he'd say one visit. "Children need a father who is present." The next visit, he'd criticize me for leaving work early for a parent-teacher conference. "Can't you delegate that? You're not taking your career seriously." There was no winning, so I stopped playing. The call that changed everything came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when I was 31. I was in my office reviewing a particularly heartbreaking case file. It was from the governor's office. A judicial vacancy had opened up in the Cook County Circuit Court, Family Division. My mentor, Judge Thorne, now the Chief Justice, had put my name forward. The Judicial Selection Committee had reviewed my record, my clerkship, my work as an ASA, my reputation for fairness and dedication, and they were offering me the appointment. I was stunned. At 31, I would be one of the youngest judges ever appointed in Illinois. The position was exactly where I wanted to be, a place where I could make a real difference in the lives of children and families. I accepted without hesitation. That night, Sarah and I opened a bottle of champagne we'd been saving. We celebrated in our modest apartment, with Chloe babbling on the floor between us, the embodiment of everything we were working for. "Are you going to tell your father?" Sarah asked gently. I thought about it for a long moment. I pictured the phone call, the inevitable skepticism, the way he would find some angle to diminish this incredible achievement. "No," I said finally. "Let him think what he wants. This one is for me." And so, my father continued to believe I was a directionless prosecutor, still struggling to find my footing. Meanwhile, every morning I put on a black robe and wielded the authority of the state of Illinois, making decisions that would shape families for generations. For 7 years, the secret held. For 7 years, I lived a double life. In the hallowed halls of the Richard J. Daley Center, I was the Honorable Rebecca Hayes, a respected judge known for my meticulous preparation and my unwavering focus on the best interests of the child. I presided over bitter custody disputes, heartbreaking termination of parental rights cases, and complex adoptions. My colleagues knew me as a dedicated jurist. The lawyers who appeared before me knew me as fair but firm. But at family gatherings, I was just Rebecca, the disappointing son. My father would hold court, pontificating about the stock market and his latest acquisitions, occasionally gesturing toward me with a dismissive wave. "My son, Rebecca," he'd say to a business acquaintance, "still working for the county. A noble profession, I suppose, but not exactly a path to prosperity." I'd let the comment slide, offering a tight-lipped smile. Correcting him felt pointless. His narrative about me was set in stone, and challenging it would only lead to a pointless, draining argument. My career was my sanctuary, the one part of my life he couldn't touch, because he didn't know it existed. Our relationship was a fragile truce, maintained through obligatory holiday visits and infrequent phone calls that always left me feeling exhausted. He doted on Chloe in his own awkward way, buying her extravagant gifts but rarely getting on the floor to play with her. And he couldn't resist offering unsolicited, critical advice on our parenting. "You're letting her watch too much television. That preschool seems a bit progressive. Is she learning any real discipline?" Sarah learned to run interference, gracefully changing the subject or steering him away when she saw his critical gaze settle on me. What I failed to realize was that my father wasn't just making passing comments. He was collecting data. He was filing away every perceived slight, every parenting choice he disagreed with, every time I mentioned a stressful day at work. He was building a case against me for a trial I didn't even know was on the docket. The call that shattered our Cold War came on a Friday night. I was at home, helping Chloe build a ridiculously ambitious Lego castle. My phone rang, displaying my brother Ryan's name. We hadn't been close in years. His struggles with alcohol had created a chasm between us, filled with broken promises and painful memories. "Rebecca." His voice was a ghost, thin and cracking. "I screwed up. I screwed up bad." He was in a detox facility, his 4th attempt at sobriety in 5 years. This time it was serious. Child Protective Services had gotten involved. His children, my 10-year-old nephew Leo and 7-year-old niece Mia, had been found at a public park alone, long after dark. A concerned bystander had called the police. Ryan had been on a multi-day bender and had no memory of leaving them there. He had survived, but his parental rights were hanging by a thread. "They won't let me have them back, Rebecca," he sobbed into the phone. "They're talking about foster care. Please, don't let them take my kids. They're all I have left." I closed my eyes, the weight of his words pressing down on me. Sarah and I had talked about this possibility before, during his previous relapses. Now it was horrifyingly real. Leo and Mia, two sweet kids I had only seen sporadically over the years, were caught in the wreckage of my brother's disease. They needed a safe harbor. "Let me talk to Sarah," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "We'll figure something out." I found her in the kitchen and explained the situation. She didn't hesitate for a second. "Of course, we'll take them," she said, her expression firm. "They're family." The next morning I called CPS and began the arduous process of applying for temporary guardianship. The caseworker sounded relieved. "It's always best for children to be with family," she said. We scheduled a home study and started preparing a room for them. Everything seemed to be falling into place. Then the caseworker dropped the bomb. "Just so you're aware, Mr. Hayes," she said, her tone professional, "your father has also filed a petition for custody." The news hit me like a physical blow. My father wanted custody? The man who measured a child's worth by their future earning potential? The man who had outsourced most of his own parenting to my mother and a series of nannies? It made no sense. This wasn't about Leo and Mia's welfare. It couldn't be. This was a power play. It was his ultimate move in our lifelong chess match, a way to declare to the world that he, not I, was the stable, capable man in the family. It was a declaration of his complete and utter lack of faith in me, not just as a son, but as a father and a provider. "Are you certain?" I asked the caseworker, the question sounding foolish as soon as it left my lips. "Yes, Mr. Arthur Hayes filed the petition this morning. He stated that as the paternal grandfather, with significant financial resources and a stable home, he believes he is the most suitable guardian." A cold dread washed over me. This was about control. This was about him proving, once and for all, that I was the failure he always said I was. I hung up the phone and immediately called him. It went straight to voicemail. A minute later, a text message appeared on my screen. "Rebecca, this is for the good of the children. We'll let the court decide what's best." The court. My court. The irony was suffocating. He was unwittingly bringing his battle to my home turf. He knew I was a lawyer, of course, but he had no idea of my position. He thought he was challenging a low-level county attorney. He had no idea he was about to challenge a judge in a system where my name and my reputation were well known. He also didn't know that my mentor, Chief Justice Marcus Thorne, would almost certainly be the one to hear a case involving one of his own judges to ensure absolute impartiality. The first step was a mandatory mediation session. I took personal leave, citing a family emergency. Chief Justice Thorne was discreet and supportive. "Take all the time you need, Rebecca," he said, his expression giving nothing away, though I knew the court clerks would have already briefed him on the nature of the filing. Family first. I walked into the mediator's office to find my father already seated, looking every bit the captain of industry. He wore a bespoke charcoal suit, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. His posture was ramrod straight, an image of unwavering authority. He was there to win. "Father," I said, my voice even as I sat down across the table from him. "Rebecca," he replied, with a slight condescending nod. "I trust you'll see reason and withdraw your petition. This isn't a contest." "It's not," I agreed. "It's about two children who need a safe, loving home. Sarah and I can provide that." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "You? Rebecca, you've spent your entire adult life chasing one fleeting interest after another. You have a wife who works grueling hours and your own child to manage. These children are traumatized. They require constant, dedicated attention. They need stability, something you've never been able to achieve." Before I could retort, the mediator, a calm woman named Ms. Albright, entered and began the session. I presented our case clearly and logically. I spoke of our stable home, the room we had already prepared for Leo and Mia, Chloe's excitement about having her cousins live with us. I outlined how Sarah and I would manage our schedules to ensure one of us was always available. I spoke of love, family, and normalcy. Then my father spoke. His voice was smooth, filled with a feigned, sorrowful concern that was more infuriating than open hostility. "My son is a good man," he began, "but he is adrift. His career has been a series of lateral moves at best. He lacks the financial security and, frankly, the stability of temperament required for this challenge. I, on the other hand, am retired. I have a large home, a full-time housekeeper, and the financial resources to provide for their every need, tutors, therapy, whatever it takes. I can offer them a foundation for success. My son can only offer them good intentions." Ms. Albright looked at me. "Mr. Hayes, would you like to respond to your father's characterization of your career?" My mouth went dry. This was the moment. I could say it. I am a judge. I have held the same esteemed position for 7 years. But the words wouldn't come. The 16-year-old boy in the study, being called a failure, was still there, choking me into silence. "My employment is stable," I managed to say. "I can provide all the necessary documentation." My father gave a thin, knowing smile. "We'll see about that." The mediation was a dead end. We left the office in a tense silence. As we reached the lobby, my father put a hand on my shoulder, his grip surprisingly strong. "I'm doing this for them, Rebecca. You have to understand that. They've had one parent fail them. I won't let it happen again." The implication was clear. Ryan had failed them, and I was next in line. "The only thing I understand, Dad," I said, shrugging off his hand, "is that you've never seen me as anything but a disappointment. This isn't about the kids. This is about you needing to be right." His jaw tightened. "If you truly cared about those children, you'd step aside and let me give them the life you can't." I walked away without another word, my hands trembling with a rage I hadn't felt in years. This was no longer just about Leo and Mia's future. It was about my past, my present, and every judgment he had ever passed on me. Our attorney, Jessica Riley, was a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who specialized in contested guardianships. "He's trying to build a narrative," she told me in her office overlooking the Chicago River. "He's painting you as unstable and himself as the bedrock of the family. We need to dismantle that narrative piece by piece." "He has nothing," I said, shaking my head. "It's all based on his own biased opinion." Jessica slid a thick folder across her desk. "He has more than you think. He's submitted a declaration outlining what he calls your pattern of professional and personal instability. He's been keeping notes, Rebecca, for years." My blood ran cold as I opened the folder. Inside were dozens of pages, a meticulously documented history of my perceived failures. Each job change was listed not as a promotion or a strategic move, but as evidence of my inability to commit. He quoted conversations from years ago, twisting my words to fit his narrative. August 2018. Rebecca complained about the long hours as an ASA, indicated a lack of fortitude for demanding work. May 2020, admitted that Sarah's income was the primary support for their lifestyle, suggesting his own career was inadequate. Christmas 2022, appeared distracted and overwhelmed with his own daughter, raising questions about his capacity to handle 2 more children. It was a chronicle of my life as seen through the warped lens of his disapproval. He had taken normal life events, moments of stress and private conversations, and weaponized them. "He's been planning this," I whispered, the reality of his betrayal settling in my stomach like a stone. Every critical comment, every probing question, he was gathering ammunition. "And he has witnesses," Jessica added grimly. "Your Uncle Robert, a few of his old business partners, even your former neighbor, Mr. Henderson. They've all submitted affidavits supporting his claims, testifying to your unsettled nature." I felt the air leave my lungs. These were people who barely knew me. Uncle Robert lived in Florida and sent a check for Chloe's birthday every year. Mr. Henderson had moved away when Chloe was a toddler. How can they testify to something they know nothing about? "Your father can be very convincing," Jessica said. "He's a powerful man, and he's telling a story people are inclined to believe. The concerned patriarch stepping in to save his grandchildren from his well-meaning but floundering son." The one piece of good news was the home study. The CPS caseworker had visited our home and been thoroughly impressed. She noted our house was warm, safe, and child-centric. She observed Chloe, who was bright, happy, and clearly adored by her parents. Her report described us as a stable and nurturing family unit. "What about my job?" I asked Jessica, my voice low. "The fact that I'm a judge, that has to count for something." "It's more than something, Rebecca. It's our trump card," she confirmed. "It demolishes his entire argument about your instability, but we have to play it at the right moment. Let him build his case in court. Let him commit to this narrative in front of the judge. When he's at the peak of his argument, we'll pull the rug out from under him." A notice from the court arrived the next day. The case had been assigned. As I had suspected, it was going before Chief Justice Marcus Thorne. My father would have no idea of the connection. He would walk into that courtroom believing he was facing a stranger, an impartial arbiter who would be swayed by his wealth and influence. He was about to find out that the man on the bench knew the truth, not just about my career, but about my character. The stage was set for a confrontation I had spent my entire life avoiding. The day of the hearing, the air in the Daly Center was thick with the usual controlled chaos of the justice system. But for me, it felt different. I was walking into my workplace not as a judge, but as a petitioner, my family's private pain about to become public record. I wore a simple navy suit, a deliberate choice to appear as a father, not a jurist. Sarah was by my side, her presence a quiet source of strength. "You've got this," she whispered, squeezing my hand as we entered the courtroom. My father was already there, seated at the opposing table with his high-priced attorney. He looked confident, imperial. He gave me a brief, unreadable glance before turning his attention to his notes. In the front row sat the CPS caseworker and my Uncle Robert, looking deeply uncomfortable. At precisely 9:00 a.m., the bailiff's voice boomed, "All rise!" and Chief Justice Marcus Thorne swept into the room. He was a man who commanded authority effortlessly. He took his seat on the bench, his gaze sweeping over the courtroom before landing on the case file. "We are here today on the matter of the guardianship of Leo and Mia Hayes," he began, his voice calm and resonant. "I have read the petitions from both the paternal grandfather, Mr. Arthur Hayes, and the paternal uncle, Mr. Rebecca Hayes. We will begin with opening statements. My father's lawyer went first, painting a masterful picture of Arthur Hayes as the family savior. He spoke of my father's vast resources, his unwavering stability, and his deep desire to provide his grandchildren with every advantage in life. He then contrasted this with a carefully worded, damning portrait of me, a man with a commendable but ultimately unstable career history. A man who, despite his best intentions, lacks the foundational security these children so desperately need. When it was Jessica's turn, she was concise and factual. She spoke of our loving home, our commitment to providing normalcy and emotional support, and our desire to keep the children connected to their cousin Chloe. She deliberately downplayed my career, referring to my stable employment in the legal field. The trap was being set. The first witnesses were character references. A friend of ours, a respected pediatrician, testified to our excellent parenting skills. Then my father's witnesses took the stand. Uncle Robert mumbled his way through a testimony about how I'd always seemed less focused than my brother Ryan. On cross-examination, Jessica got him to admit he hadn't seen me in person in over 3 years. Then, my father was called to the stand. He walked to the witness box with an air of solemn duty, as if this was a burden he was reluctant but honor-bound to bear. His lawyer led him through a series of questions designed to highlight his fitness as a guardian. He spoke of the trust fund he would establish, the elite private school he had already researched, the therapeutic equestrian program he planned to enroll them in. It was a dazzling display of financial power. Then came the moment I had been dreading and anticipating. "Mr. Hayes," his lawyer asked, "could you elaborate on your concerns regarding your son Rebecca's ability to provide a stable environment?" My father sighed, a perfect performance of paternal regret. "I love my son," he said, looking directly at Justice Thorne. "But love is not enough. Rebecca has never been able to settle. He has a history of jumping from job to job, law clerk, prosecutor, always searching for something new. He lacks the discipline to stick with one path and build a solid foundation. These children have been through enough turmoil. They need an anchor, not a ship that's constantly changing course." "So in your professional opinion, having built a successful business from the ground up, you would characterize your son's career as unstable?" My father's gaze shifted to me, his eyes cold and unwavering. "Unstable is a kind word," he said, his voice dropping for dramatic effect. "He's a good person, but when it comes to a career, to providing for a family in the long term, he's a complete failure." The words echoed in the silent courtroom. A complete failure. He had finally said it, the core of his belief about me, under oath, in a public forum. I felt Sarah's hand grip mine under the table. I looked up at the bench. Justice Thorne's face was a mask of judicial neutrality, but I saw a flicker in his eyes. The bait had been taken. As my father's lawyer concluded his questioning, Jessica stood up, her movements calm and deliberate as she approached the witness stand. "Mr. Hayes," she began, her tone polite, "you've testified at length about your son's employment history. You seem to have followed it quite closely." "I'm his father," Arthur replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "Of course I've kept track of his endeavors." "So you feel confident that you have a full and accurate understanding of his professional life?" "I believe so, yes," he said, sitting up straighter. "Could you tell the court, to the best of your knowledge, what your son's current job is?" Jessica asked. My father paused, a slight frown creasing his brow. "He's a prosecutor of some kind, I believe, for the county. As I said, it changes." "A prosecutor for the county," Jessica repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "And how long has he held this position?" I'm not certain of the exact duration. A year? Maybe 2? He said dismissively. It's hard to keep up. Jessica nodded slowly. Your Honor, at this time, I would like to introduce into evidence Petitioner's Exhibit A, a certified record of employment for Mr. Rebecca Hayes from the Illinois State Bar Association. She handed a document to the clerk, who then passed copies to Justice Thorne, my father's attorney, and finally to my father himself. I watched as he took the paper, his expression one of mild annoyance. He glanced down at it, his eyes scanning the first few entries. Law Clerk, U.S. District Court, Assistant State's Attorney, Cook County. He nodded as if to say, See? I was right. Then his eyes moved to the final entry. I saw the exact moment he read it. His confident posture faltered. The color drained from his face. His knuckles, gripping the paper, turned white. The courtroom was utterly silent. My father's attorney leaned over, whispering frantically, but my father didn't seem to hear him. He just stared at the paper, then slowly lifted his head to look at me, his eyes wide with a confusion so profound it was almost comical. Then he looked at the bench, at the man in the black robes, as a horrifying realization began to dawn on him. Chief Justice Thorne cleared his throat, and the sound seemed to echo in the cavernous room. For the record, he said, his voice imbued with a quiet authority that commanded every ounce of attention, the document is accurate. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. Mr. Hayes has not been an assistant state's attorney for some time. In fact, for the past 7 years, he has served with distinction as a judge of the Circuit Court of Cook County Family Division. He presides over cases in this very building. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. My father's jaw had physically dropped. He looked back and forth between me and Justice Thorne, his carefully constructed reality crumbling into dust. He is one of the most respected jurists in his division, Justice Thorne continued, his eyes fixed on my father. He is known for his integrity, his deep understanding of family law, and his unwavering commitment to the welfare of children. I know this because, as Chief Justice, I oversee his work, and before that, I had the privilege of being his mentor. The final sentence landed like a guillotine. His mentor. My father slumped back in his chair as if he'd been struck. The image he had so carefully crafted of himself as the strong patriarch and me as the floundering failure had been publicly and irrefutably obliterated. The man he had just called a complete failure was, in fact, a respected peer of the judge who held his grandchildren's fate in his hands. Mr. Hayes, Jessica said gently into the profound silence, given this information, would you like to reconsider your testimony regarding your son's stability and fitness as a guardian? My father opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He just shook his head, a small, defeated gesture. No further questions, Your Honor, Jessica said, and walked back to our table. Chief Justice Thorne delivered his ruling without a recess. He didn't need one. The case had been decided the moment the truth of my profession was revealed. He spoke calmly, methodically dismantling every one of my father's arguments. He cited the glowing report from the CPS caseworker, the stability of our home, and my demonstrated professional commitment, not to mention my deep expertise in the very matters at hand. While the court acknowledges Mr. Arthur Hayes's financial capacity, he stated, guardianship is not a matter of wealth, but of welfare. It is about providing a safe, stable, and loving environment. It is clear to this court that such an environment is best provided by Mr. Rebecca and Mrs. Sarah Hayes. He granted us full temporary guardianship of Leo and Mia. He ordered that my father would have supervised visitation, a clear signal that the court had concerns about his judgment. "Court is adjourned," he said, and the sharp rap of his gavel felt like the final word on my entire childhood. As the courtroom emptied, Thomas embraced me tightly. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. I saw my father sitting alone at his table, his expensive lawyer having already packed up and left. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, a titan reduced to a tired old man. I walked over to him, not out of pity, but because something needed to be said. He looked up as I approached, his eyes holding a mixture of shame and disbelief. "A judge," he whispered. "All this time." "You never asked, Dad," I said, my voice devoid of anger, only a quiet sadness. "You were so busy looking for the failure, you couldn't see the man standing right in front of you." He had no reply. As I turned and walked away to join my family, a 30-year weight lifted from my shoulders. That evening, we brought Leo and Mia home. The road ahead would be long, but for the first time, it was a road we would all walk together, as a family. My father's judgment no longer had any power over me. I had finally found my own verdict. And as I share this story with you, I want to ask, have you ever had to fight to define your own success against someone else's narrow expectations? How did you learn to trust your own path? Share your story in the comments below. If my journey resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe for more stories, and share this with anyone who needs a reminder that they are the ultimate judge of their own worth. Thank you for listening.